In the blood-soaked chaos of 16th century Japan, one name echoed across battlefields with a mixture of terror and awe: Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. It was a title that belonged to Mara, the Buddhist embodiment of temptation and destruction, the force that sought to prevent enlightenment itself. Yet this name was claimed by a mortal man, a warlord who would burn sacred temples to ash, revolutionize warfare, and nearly unite an entire nation through sheer force of will. This is the story of Oda Nobunaga, the first great unifier of Japan, whose life reads like something between legend and nightmare. The Japan of Nobunaga's time was a fractured realm. The Sengoku period, the age of warring states, had shattered the country into countless competing domains. Provincial warlords called Daimyo carved out their own kingdoms, each one dreaming of supremacy. The shogun in Kyoto was little more than a ceremonial figurehead. The emperor held even less power. Warrior monks commanded armies from fortified temple complexes. It was a world where survival demanded ruthlessness, where tradition could be a death sentence, and where a man willing to break every rule might just reshape the entire nation. Into this maelstrom came Nobunaga, and nothing would ever be the same. On June 23, 1534, in Nagoya Castle within Owari Province, a child was born who would change Japanese history forever. His name was Kapashi, later to become Oda Nobunaga. His father, Oda Nobuhide, was a relatively minor daimyo, a deputy military governor controlling territories around modern-day Nagoya. The Oda clan was not among Japan's great families. They lacked the prestige of the Takeda, the legendary status of the Uesugi, or the vast domains of the Imagawa. But what they lacked in power, they would soon make up for in ambition. Young Nobunaga's behavior shocked everyone who encountered him. From his earliest teenage years, he developed a reputation that earned him a nickname that would follow him for years: Owari no Outsuke, the Great Fool of Owari. The title was not meant affectionately. Where other young samurai lords practiced elegant calligraphy and studied classical poetry, Nobunaga wore outrageous clothing that violated every standard of propriety. He strutted through the streets in sleeveless bathrobes and short trousers tied with hemp rope, his hair bound up with colored cords in a style that horrified the conservative samurai class. He carried his swords thrust into a straw rope belt, eating melons and rice cakes as he walked, a habit considered the height of poor manners then as now. But perhaps most scandalously, Nobunaga associated freely with commoners. He hunted with peasants, visited taverns and brothels with friends from all social classes, and showed complete disdain for the rigid hierarchy that defined samurai society. While his peers practiced formal tea ceremonies and studied proper etiquette, Nobunaga was wrestling, swimming, watching sumo matches, and doing something that would define his future: obsessively practicing with the Tanegashima, the arquebus firearms that Portuguese traders had recently introduced to Japan. Most samurai viewed these weapons with suspicion, seeing them as dishonorable and unreliable. Nobunaga saw the future. Some historians speculate that this eccentric behavior was deliberate strategy rather than genuine foolishness. In 1549, Nobunaga's father arranged a political marriage between the young heir and Nohime, daughter of Seito Dosan, the daimyo of neighboring Mino province. The marriage sealed a peace between two previously hostile domains. For Nohime, described as a renowned beauty of her time, the match must have seemed disappointing. Her new husband was famous mainly for his bizarre dress sense and uncouth behavior, hardly an impressive catch, despite his father's position. When Oda Nobuhide died unexpectedly in 1551, succession should have been straightforward. Nobunaga was the legitimate heir, but his outrageous behavior had alienated key retainers within the clan. and many questioned whether such an undisciplined youth could lead them. At his father's funeral, Nobunaga reportedly threw ceremonial incense at the altar, rather than offering it respectfully. An act of shocking disrespect that confirmed every doubt about his character. Some clan members began plotting to support his younger brother, Nobuyuki, who possessed all the dignity and proper manners that Nobunaga lacked. What followed was a brutal period of internal clan warfare. Nobunaga faced challenges not just from rivals outside the clan, but from his own relatives. His uncle Oda Nobutomo attempted to seize power with backing from provincial governors. Nobunaga's own brothers plotted against him. In 1553, one of his closest advisors and mentors, Hirate Masahide, committed ritual suicide, an act many believed was meant to admonish Nobunaga for his behavior. But whether from grief or calculation, the death affected Nobunaga deeply. He later built a temple to honor Masahide's memory. Through cunning, ruthlessness, and unexpected tactical brilliance, Nobunaga gradually eliminated his rivals. When his brother Nobuyuki conspired with key retainers in 1557, Nobunaga initially defeated him in battle, then pardoned him. But when Nobuyuki began plotting a second uprising, Nobunaga feigned illness, lured his brother to Kiyosu Castle, and had him assassinated. The message to potential rivals was clear. By 1559, after nearly a decade of struggle, Nobunaga had finally unified Owari Province under his control. The Fool of Owari had become a force to be reckoned with. But the true test was yet to come. In June of 1560, the most powerful daimyo in the region made his move. Imagawa Yoshimoto controlled 3 prosperous provinces: Suruga, Totomi, and Mikawa. His domain dwarfed Nobunaga's single province of Owari. When Yoshimoto marched toward Kyoto with an army estimated at 25,000 men, the official purpose was to support the Ashikaga shogunate. But the brutal scale of the invasion revealed his true intention: conquest. Owari Province stood directly in his path. Nobunaga could muster perhaps 2,000 soldiers, maybe less. His advisors urged him to surrender or seek terms. Fighting seemed suicidal, but surrender was not in Nobunaga's nature. Instead, he studied every scrap of intelligence about Yoshimoto's movements, looking for any possible advantage. When he learned that the vast Imagawa army had made camp in a narrow, sheltered valley near the village of Okehazama, celebrating their unopposed advance through Owari, Nobunaga saw his opportunity. On the morning of June 12th, as a violent rainstorm swept across the region, Nobunaga led a small force on a desperate gamble. Using the storm as cover, he positioned his troops in the forests surrounding the valley where Yoshimoto's army rested. The Imagawa, confident in their overwhelming numbers and pleased with their progress, had relaxed their guard. They feasted and celebrated, never imagining that the supposedly foolish young lord of Owari would dare attack. When the storm reached its peak, Nobunaga struck. His forces erupted from the forests in a coordinated assault on Yoshimoto's position. The attack was so sudden, so unexpected, that the Imagawa forces had no time to organize a proper defense. In the chaos of the storm and the surprise attack, Nobunaga's men fought their way to Yoshimoto's command position. In the fierce fighting that followed, Imagawa Yoshimoto himself was killed. The death of their commander shattered the Imagawa army. What had been an organized force of 25,000 became a confused mob. Soldiers fled in every direction. The invasion collapsed entirely. Nobunaga had achieved what seemed impossible, defeating an enemy more than 10 times his size through audacity, cunning, and perfect timing. The victory at Okehazama became legendary across Japan. the fool of Owari, was suddenly recognized as a brilliant military strategist. The battle's consequences reached far beyond the immediate military victory. The Imagawa clan, which had seemed poised to become a major power, never recovered. Their domains fractured as vassals and subject territories declared independence or switched allegiance. Among those who took advantage of the collapse was a young commander named Matsudaira Motoyasu, who had been forced to fight for the Imagawa. After Okehazama, he seized control of Mikawa Province and approached Nobunaga with an offer of alliance. This partnership would prove crucial to both men's futures, for Motoyasu would later become known as Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who would eventually found the Tokugawa shogunate and complete the unification of Japan. But that was decades away. For Nobunaga, Okehazama established patterns that would define his entire career. He had achieved victory through rejection of conventional military wisdom, through willingness to take enormous risks, and through exploitation of both psychological factors and environmental conditions. He had also demonstrated absolute ruthlessness in eliminating opponents. These qualities would carry him from provincial warlord to the most powerful man in Japan. They would also make him legendary, feared, and ultimately give birth to his most famous title.
The exchange happened in 1573,
recorded by the Jesuit missionary Louis Froisse in his annual reports. By this time, Nobunaga controlled much of central Japan and had displaced the Ashikaga shogunate, making him the de facto ruler of the realm. But his expansion had created enemies, and one of his most formidable opponents was Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai, one of the most respected daimyo of the age. The previous year, Nobunaga had committed an act that shocked the entire nation. The great temple complex of Enryaku-ji on Mount Hiei, headquarters of the Tendai sect of Buddhism and a center of learning for over 7 centuries, had been systematically destroyed. We'll explore that atrocity in detail shortly, but for now, understand that this was no ordinary military operation. Mount Hiei was sacred ground, protected by tradition and religious authority. The monks there had trained some of Japan's most prominent spiritual leaders. Burning it was seen by many as not just sacrilege, but as an attack on Buddhism itself.
Takeda Shingen, a fervent Buddhist, gave protection to survivors of the massacre, including Kakujo, the head of the Tendai sect. In a letter to Nobunaga, Shingen signed his name as Tendai no Zazu Shemin Shingen, essentially claiming the title of head priest of the Tendai sect, emphasizing his role as protector of the Buddhist faith. The implication was clear. Shingen positioned himself as a defender of religion against Nobunaga's destruction. Nobunaga's response was characteristically audacious. He signed his reply, Dairakuten no Mao Nobunaga, the Demon King of the 6th Heaven. To understand the weight of this title, one must understand Buddhist cosmology. In Buddhist teaching, Mara, the Demon King of the 6th Heaven, is the ultimate tempter, the force that tried to prevent Buddha's enlightenment. He represents attachment to worldly pleasures, the obstacles to spiritual liberation, and the power that seeks to keep souls trapped in the cycle of rebirth. He is, in essence, the Buddhist equivalent of Satan. Was Nobunaga serious? Many historians believe the title was sarcastic, a mocking response to Shingen's pompous claim of spiritual authority. After all, Shingen was not actually the head of the Tendai sect, any more than Uesugi Kenshin was truly the incarnation of the war god Bishamonten, despite his claims. Nobunaga may have been saying, in effect, if you're going to claim divine titles, then I'll claim the most fearsome one available. It was a characteristically bold gesture, turning Shingen's religious posturing into dark comedy. But there's another interpretation. Perhaps Nobunaga embraced the title genuinely. By this point in his career, he had demonstrated absolute willingness to destroy religious institutions that opposed him.
He had burned temples, slaughtered monks, and showed no reverence for traditions that others considered sacred. His personal seal read Tenka Fubu, which translates roughly as rule the empire by force or all the world by force of arms. He promoted based on merit rather than birth, elevated commoners to positions of power if they proved capable, and showed contempt for the class hierarchies that defined samurai society. In claiming the title of Demon King, Nobunaga may have been announcing something profound about his worldview. He was not opposing Buddhism itself, but rather the idea that religious authority could limit secular power, that tradition should constrain innovation, or that the established order was immutable. In this interpretation, Nobunaga was declaring himself the enemy of any force, divine or human, that stood in the way of unifying Japan under rational. Before we examine Nobunaga's most notorious act, we must understand how he revolutionized Japanese warfare. The Battle of Nagashino in 1575 showcased tactics that would influence military thinking for centuries. Facing the legendary cavalry of the Takeda clan, Nobunaga deployed 3,000 arquebusiers behind protective barriers. He organized them in rotating lines so that while one line fired, the others reloaded, producing continuous volleys that shattered the Takeda cavalry charges. The Takeda had been considered nearly invincible. Nobunaga's innovative use of firearms destroyed them. But firearms were only part of his revolution. Nobunaga was the first daimyo to truly embrace merit-based promotion. While other lords filled positions based on family lineage, Nobunaga elevated anyone who proved their worth. His most famous general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, started as a sandal-bearer, the lowest of servants. Through demonstrated talent, Hideyoshi rose to become one of Nobunaga's most trusted commanders and would eventually succeed him as ruler of Japan. This meritocratic approach attracted talented individuals from across Japan who found themselves blocked by birth in more traditional domains. Nobunaga also revolutionized economic policy. He abolished many of the tolls and restrictions that had choked commerce under the old feudal system. He promoted free markets, encouraged trade, and understood that economic strength was the foundation of military power. Castle towns under his control became centers of commerce and manufacturing, transitioning from purely agricultural economies to more diversified systems. He established currency regulations and promoted trade relationships with European merchants, particularly the Portuguese. His willingness to adopt foreign innovations extended beyond firearms. He wore European armor on occasion, employed Jesuit missionaries as advisors on world affairs, and showed genuine interest in their scientific knowledge. While many daimyo viewed foreigners with suspicion or hostility, Nobunaga saw them as sources of useful technology and information. This openness to external ideas, combined with absolute ruthlessness toward internal opposition, made him extraordinarily effective. Yet this same ruthlessness would manifest in acts of stunning brutality, and nowhere was this more evident than in his treatment of religious institutions that opposed him. Mount Hiei had stood as a sacred site for nearly 800 years. In 788, the monk Saicho established the first shrine on the mountain slopes near Kyoto, founding what would become the vast Enryaku-ji temple complex. This became the headquarters of the Tendai sect of Japanese Buddhism and one of the great centers of learning in Asia. At its peak, the complex housed thousands of monks and boasted up to 3,000 buildings spread across the mountain's forested slopes. But by the 16th century, Enryaku-ji had become something far different from a place of peaceful contemplation. The complex maintained its own army of warrior monks, the Sohei, numbering in the thousands. These armed monks had participated in political conflicts for centuries, marching down from the mountain whenever they felt their interests threatened. They allied with various daimyo, fought against rival Buddhist sects, and wielded enormous influence over Kyoto's politics. The complex had been attacked and burned multiple times over the centuries, so much so that an 11th century emperor had complained that the three things he could not control were the flooding of the Kamo River, the dice of gambling games, and the monks of Mount Hiei. When Nobunaga began his campaign to control central Japan, Enryaku-ji supported his enemies. The monks allied with the Azai and Asakura clans, providing them sanctuary and military support. They gave refuge to leaders of the Iko-iki, militant followers of the true Pure Land Buddhist sect who opposed Nobunaga's expansion. From Nobunaga's perspective, Mount Hiei represented everything he despised, a powerful institution claiming religious authority to justify political interference, military force wrapped in spiritual garments, and a center of opposition to centralized control. In September of 1571, Nobunaga made his decision. The Enryaku-ji offered him 300 gold coins to spare the complex, and nearby Kitada offered 200 more. Nobunaga refused. On the night of September 29th, he deployed 30,000 troops in 3 columns, surrounding the mountain from all approaches. The attack began with the burning of Sakamoto, the town at the mountain's base, driving residents up the slopes, seeking refuge in the temple complex. Then came the assault itself. Nobunaga's forces advanced up the mountain from all sides. Arquebusiers provided covering fire. The warrior monks fought, but they were overwhelmed by numbers and firepower. As troops pushed upward, they set fire to every building they encountered. The great halls of Enryaku-ji, repositories of priceless manuscripts and sacred texts, collapsed in flames. The Konpon Chudo, the main hall, was consumed by fire. Within the hall burned an oil lamp that tradition held had remained lit for over 1,200 years, tended continuously by generations of monks. Remarkably, historical records suggest that even during the destruction, monks managed to preserve this eternal flame, though thousands of other treasures were lost forever. The death toll remains disputed. Contemporary sources claimed up to 20,000 died, though modern archaeological evidence suggests the numbers may have been lower. What is certain is that the slaughter included not just warrior monks, but elderly priests, refugees from Sakamoto, and non-combatants who had sought sanctuary on the sacred mountain. Nobunaga's orders were explicit. Kill everyone. Only a single hall, the Ruri-do, survived the destruction. Possibly by accident or perhaps spared by individual soldiers. The burning of Mount Hiei stunned Japan. Emperor Ogamachi protested, though he lacked power to oppose Nobunaga's decision. Religious institutions across the country disbanded their military forces or pledged loyalty to avoid similar fate. The message was unmistakable. Religious authority offered no protection against military force, and sacred ground meant nothing to a warlord determined to eliminate opposition. Was this religious persecution or political necessity? Nobunaga was not anti-Buddhist per se. He patronized certain temples, maintained relationships with monks who supported him, and showed respect for religious figures who did not interfere with his political objectives. But he would tolerate no independent power centers, religious or secular, that could challenge his authority. The destruction of Enryaku-ji demonstrated that even centuries of tradition, even the most sacred sites, would be swept away if they stood in his path. It was this ruthlessness, as much as his military innovations, that made him the Demon King. By 1582, Oda Nobunaga stood at the pinnacle of power. He controlled approximately 1/3 of Japan, including the crucial Kinki region around Kyoto. The Takeda clan had been destroyed that spring. The remaining major opponents were weakened by internal problems or the deaths of their leaders. Nobunaga had generals campaigning across the country, expanding his domains in every direction. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was besieging Takamatsu Castle against the Mori clan in western Japan. Plans were being made for invasions of Shikoku and other remaining independent domains. For the first time in over a century, the unification of Japan under a single ruler seemed achievable. On June 21st, Nobunaga was staying at Honnoji, a temple in Kyoto, making preparations to travel west and reinforce Hideyoshi. He had perhaps 70 guards and servants with him, a surprisingly small force, but he felt safe in firmly controlled territory. That night, one of his most trusted generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, made a decision that would shock the nation and alter Japanese history. Mitsuhide had been ordered to march west to assist Hideyoshi. Instead, he turned his army of 13,000 soldiers back toward Kyoto. According to later accounts, he announced to his troops, "The enemy awaits at Honnoji." Though historians debate whether this famous declaration actually occurred or was invented afterward, what is certain is that before dawn, Akechi's forces surrounded the temple. Nobunaga and his retainers fought desperately against overwhelming numbers, but the outcome was inevitable. Mori Ranmaru, Nobunaga's young page, set fire to the temple, both to deny the attackers Nobunaga's head and to provide cover for a possible escape. But Nobunaga chose not to flee. His last words, according to some accounts, were instructions to Ranmaru. Then he committed seppuku, ritual suicide, as the flames consumed Honnoji. Ranmaru followed his lord in death. Mitsuhide's forces also attacked Nobunaga's son and heir, Oda Nobunaga, who was staying nearby. Nobunaga fled to Nijo Castle, but was surrounded and forced to commit suicide as well. Within hours, both Nobunaga and his designated successor were dead. Curiously, neither Nobunaga's body nor Nobutada's was ever found. The fires at Honnoji burned so intensely that bones were reduced to ash, according to the missionary Louis Froith. Some historians speculate that Nobunaga ordered the destruction of his remains to prevent his head being taken as a trophy, a common practice in samurai warfare. The mystery of his final resting place has inspired legends and theories for centuries. Why did Akechi Mitsuhide betray his lord? The question has generated over 50 theories, and no definitive answer has ever been established. Some accounts claim Nobunaga had repeatedly humiliated Mitsuhide publicly, beating him and abusing him in front of other warriors. One story tells of Mitsuhide being grabbed by his topknot and kicked around like a dog for a minor mistake preparing a reception for Tokugawa Ieyasu. Another claims Nobunaga promised Mitsuhide that he would support Chosokabe Motochika in Shikoku, then reversed the policy, undermining Mitsuhide's carefully negotiated agreement and threatening his family connections. Other theories suggest more complex conspiracies. Some historians argue that the imperial court feared Nobunaga's power and orchestrated the assassination. Mitsuhide had once served the Ashikaga shogun Yoshiaki, whom Nobunaga had exiled. Perhaps Mitsuhide sought to restore the shogunate. A more recent theory suggests Toyotomi Hideyoshi himself was the mastermind, having arranged matters so that Mitsuhide would act while Hideyoshi was perfectly positioned to respond and seize power. What happened next lends some credence to that last theory. When news of Nobunaga's death reached Hideyoshi at the siege of Takamatsu Castle, he immediately made peace with the Mori clan and force-marched his army back toward Kyoto. The speed of his response was remarkable. Supply routes and stations had already been established for Nobunaga's planned journey west, and Hideyoshi's forces used these in reverse, covering the distance in just 4 days, an incredible feat of logistics. On July 2nd, barely 11 days after assassinating Nobunaga, Mitsuhide faced Hideyoshi's army at the Battle of Yamazaki. Mitsuhide had been unable to gain support from other daimyo, and his forces had dwindled to perhaps 10,000 men. Hideyoshi commanded 20,000, having won over several former Oda retainers. The battle was swift and decisive. Mitsuhide's army was routed. Mitsuhide himself was killed, either in battle or by peasants, hunting fleeing warriors for bounty, a common practice called ochimushigari.
Hideyoshi moved quickly to consolidate power. He arranged Nobunaga's funeral, using a life-sized wooden statue in place of the missing body. He maneuvered at the Kyosu Conference to control the succession, ensuring that Nobunaga's grandson, a 3-year-old child, was named heir rather than Nobunaga's adult sons, and he began the campaigns that would complete Nobunaga's work of unification, culminating in Hideyoshi becoming imperial chancellor and the effective ruler of Japan. The death of Oda Nobunaga at age 48 cut short what might have been the complete unification of Japan under his rule. Instead, that achievement fell to Toyotomi Hideyoshi and ultimately to Tokugawa Ieyasu, who founded the shogunate that would rule Japan for over 250 years. Yet both men built on foundations Nobunaga established. Nobunaga's military innovations became standard practice. His economic reforms opened markets and promoted commerce. His meritocratic approach to governance demonstrated that talent could matter more than birth. His ruthless suppression of independent power centers, whether religious institutions or rival daimyo, paved the way for genuine centralized authority. The stable, unified Japan that would emerge in the early 17th century was possible because Nobunaga had shattered the old feudal order and demonstrated what could be achieved through innovation and force. But his legacy remains complex and controversial. Was he a visionary who saw beyond the limitations of his time, or a brutal tyrant who destroyed beauty and tradition in pursuit of power? The burning of Mount Hiei is still debated. Did he commit inexcusable sacrilege, or did he deliver necessary judgment to a corrupt institution that had become as much military stronghold as religious center? His adoption of the title Demon King suggests he may have embraced both interpretations, seeing himself as a necessary destroyer of old systems that stood in the way of a unified, stable Japan. In modern popular culture, Nobunaga has become one of the most frequently portrayed figures in Japanese history. He appears in countless films, television dramas, anime, manga, and video games. Sometimes he's depicted as a villain, a demonic figure whose ambition knew no limits. Other times he's shown as a tragic hero, a brilliant innovator whose methods were harsh, but whose goals were ultimately beneficial. The duality reflects the historical reality. Nobunaga was both revolutionary visionary and ruthless warlord, both destroyer and builder, both demon and unifier. The mysteries surrounding him persist. What were his ultimate intentions for Japan's government? The imperial court offered him any position he desired, including shogun, chancellor, or minister, but he gave no clear answer before his death. Would he have established a new shogunate, claimed unprecedented authority, or created something entirely new? We'll never know. His body was never found, his remains reduced to ash in the flames of Honnoji. Perhaps that's appropriate for a man who claimed the title of Demon King, a figure whose very existence seemed to dance between legend and history, between mortal ambition and supernatural force. What we do know is this: Oda Nobunaga changed Japan fundamentally and irrevocably. He demonstrated that the seemingly impossible could be achieved through bold action and tactical brilliance. He proved that tradition and religious authority
could not protect institutions from determined military force. He showed that innovation and merit could triumph over birth and established hierarchy. And he came within reach of unifying a nation that had been fragmented for over a century, achieving more in his 48 years than most would accomplish in several lifetimes. The Fool of Owari became the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven, and in doing so, he reshaped Japanese history. His story reminds us that the greatest changes often come from those willing to break every rule, challenge every assumption, and pursue their vision regardless of the cost. Whether that makes him hero or villain depends on your perspective, but there's no question that he was one of the most extraordinary figures in Japanese history. If you enjoyed this exploration of Oda Nobunaga's life and legacy, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll continue bringing you stories from history that blur the line between the legendary and the real, examining the figures whose actions echo across centuries. Until next time, remember that history is rarely as simple as we'd like it to be, and the greatest figures are often the most complex.